Good morning, everybody. Good to see a packed house, 8:30s, people coming, avoiding the traffic as well. Well, guest speakers, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, it gives me great pleasure to extend to you all a very warm welcome on behalf of Institute for Competitiveness, Indian Council on Competitiveness, SoulAce Social Venture, Fair Climate Network, Roland Berger, and EDF. Corporate social responsibility has become a buzzword, especially after the new law coming in India. If you see in the last couple of years, every company has been at a transition phase when we talk about CSR or sustainability, framing new guidelines, framing new strategy, some taking a philanthropic approach, some taking a more strategic approach. The road towards implementation has actually not been that simple, with a lot of ground level challenges, with geographies, with their own dynamics in the CSR space. The focus has also been the Sustainability Summit, creating social impact through corporate affairs, is a novel platform to discuss and deliberate on issues material to companies under the realm of social responsibility and sustainable development. Many CSR projects take off with a lot of fanfare and excitement, but eventually most of them fizzle out in due course. For a variety of reasons, some because of failure of partner organization on the ground, some because of huge stakeholder disturbances, and some fail because of minimal impact at the ground level, and serious questions of sustainability of the project. The issues could be, again, vary depending on geography, demography, politics, socio-economic challenges of the country. May 2015 is actually an opportune time to discuss the relevance of CSR because it's been 1 year since the law has already been implemented. We completed March 2015, but the first year of financial year has already been completed, and companies are now going to report on their CSR activities. So more than 16,000 companies fall under this regulation, and the results would be there in a couple of months for us to see. Our event has actually, we have a 3-panel discussion, first focusing on environment issues, because typically if you see education and healthcare is a topmost focus area for corporate sector. A lot of critical environment issues like water, waste, energy has not been talked about in detail. So our first panel talks about that. We have a lineup with sustainability heads of organizations. Second being current challenges within CSR space for implementation and partnerships, where companies cannot work in silos. It has to be partnerships with implementing organizations, stakeholders, be it government, be it NGOs, be it social entrepreneurs, be it other corporates coming together as well. And third, again, talking about what has been the change in Indian mindset if we talk about CSR and sustainability in the last couple of years, especially with the new law coming in. So look forward for 3 power-packed panels. We'll start with a keynote address with Mr. Ashok Pavadia, who's advisor and additional secretary, Ministry of Home Affairs. He's been instrumental with framing the CSR law, as well as taking the concept of shared value forward. So we look forward to have him and hear him as well. Mr. Pavadia, please.
Good morning, everyone. I've lost count of the number of seminars, conferences, and workshops in which I have spoken on CSR. It really is the buzzword these days. And I think India is the only country where CSR now occupies a place center stage in the public sector and in the private sector too. India has definitely made gigantic strides as far as CSR policy and implementation is concerned. Huge strides have been made. New initiatives have been taken very frequently. Just imagine in the span of just about 6 years or so, we have had as many number of guidelines and rules as the number of years. Starting from 2009 onwards, every year we have seen new formulation of CSR policy and guidelines. 2009, we had the Ministry of Corporate Affairs coming up with its voluntary guidelines. 2010, we saw the Department of Public Enterprises coming out with its guidelines on CSR. 2011, again, the Ministry of Corporate Affairs came up with its voluntary guidelines on responsible business. Then again in 2011, Department of Public Enterprises came up with guidelines on sustainable development. 2012, again, Department of Public Enterprises came up with its guidelines on CSR and sustainability. 2013, we had the Companies Act. 2014, February, we had the Ministry of Corporate Affairs coming out with the CSR rules framed under the Companies Act. October 2014, again, we had the Department of Public Enterprise coming out with another set of guidelines on CSR and sustainability, which are meant to supplement the CSR rules framed by the Ministry of Corporate Affairs. So just imagine, in such a short span of time, we've had so many guidelines, so many rules. It actually leads to, as some people say, a little bit of confusion in the mindset of the practitioners of CSR as to the direction in which we are going, because each of these rules, each set of rules and guidelines, they have focused on slightly different aspects of CSR. So thereby, there has been some degree of confusion. Of course, the people who are very intimately connected with this subject would realize that there is no confusion. But amongst the minds of the practitioners, I'm not surprised if there is some confusion. But having said this, yes, I must say that in India, the maximum churning in CSR and sustainability is taking as compared to the other countries. And if we look back over these developments, we would notice that the present perception of CSR is focused on the Companies Act and the CSR rules framed by the Ministry of Corporate Affairs. And the CSR rules of the Ministry of Corporate Affairs do not really define CSR. The definition is not given of CSR. The activities which are listed out in Schedule 7 of the Companies Act, they are the CSR activities. So CSR is actually identified with those activities. Let me at the beginning say that whatever views I give here are my personal views and do not necessarily represent the views of either the government or the department or the ministry I represent. I say this because I have been instrumental in framing the CSR rules and guidelines on CSR and sustainability for the Department of Public Enterprises. 2 sets of guidelines were issued by me. I was the author, and I had a different perspective of CSR. And even now, the last guidelines issued by the Department of Public Enterprises, issued in October 2014, which supplement CSR rules of Ministry of Corporate Affairs, have been authored by me. But as I was saying, if you look back, 3 important things are noticeable. I will confine myself to only a limited aspect of CSR because the theme today is creating social impact through corporate efforts. We are not discussing CSR over here. In its full form, we are not discussing its comprehensive form. 3 things are very noticeable to me. One is awareness of CSR. It has been really propagated in a big way in the country. Second is making CSR mandatory for the corporates, very striking. And the third is the involvement of the top management in the CSR activities. These 3 areas are interesting. These are the new areas or the new aspects of CSR which are now the focus of much attention and debate and discussion. There is little doubt that the awareness about CSR has spread. We may have different perspectives, different perceptions about CSR. We may have different opinions about the direction in which it is going. But the fact is, yes, the awareness about CSR has really spread. And for any social impact that we need to create through corporate efforts, first important thing is awareness of CSR. Awareness of what can be done to bring about this social impact through CSR initiatives. So awareness is there. But as I mentioned, at the moment, the CSR is identified with the activities listed out in Schedule 7 of the Act. And if you read these activities and the list given in Schedule 7 of the Act, you will find that basically it deals with activities relating to community development, to the upliftment of the marginalized and the neglected sections of society, empowerment of women, doing something for some welfare measures and schemes for the old and the infirm, for child development. This is basically the focus of attention in the activities. And of course, apart from these social issues, there is mention of ecological preservation, environment protection too. These aspects are there. My point is, this is very good, excellent, this awareness about CSR that we have brought about. But the CSR, the kind of CSR that has been rolled out for the practitioners of CSR has certain limitations, my viewpoint, not the government's. It has certain limitations, and the earlier we overcome these limitations and we do some kind of a mid-course correction, the better it would be, I think, for the cause of CSR, for the practitioners of CSR, and for the beneficiaries of CSR. Now, what is this? What are these limitations? Limitations is that CSR is not really just confined to the activities listed out in Schedule 7 of the Companies Act. If you take a broader perspective, because we have to be aware of the global best practices also, the way CSR is practiced worldwide, and we also need to be aware of the content of the scholarly works of the CSR experts. There are various schools of thought about CSR, and different scholars, different practitioners world over have different perception of CSR and the way it should be practiced. Confining our vision only to Schedule 7 of the Companies Act may not give the true picture, may not give the complete picture. It goes beyond that. CSR is multidimensional, it is multifaceted. And this is precisely what was attempted in the Department of Public Guidelines of 2012, December. If you go through these guidelines, there an attempt was made to actually blend all the perspectives of CSR, all the perspectives, prevalent, important perspectives of CSR. There was an attempt to do that. CSR is not only about community development and welfare of these people, but it is also about doing business in a responsible manner, for example. Business has to behave responsibly at all times, and not only when spending 2% of its profits, average net profits. It is the duty cast upon all corporates to behave responsibly at all times and do conduct their business in a responsible manner, with responsibility towards society, towards environment, towards economy, towards business itself. That is important, an important aspect of CSR. And while practicing responsible business, it is the duty, it is the responsibility of the corporates to ensure that they retain their own financial sustainability also. Downtrodden, the underprivileged. It is also about the internal stakeholders of the company, which at times we tend to neglect. Internal stakeholders, we mean the employees of the companies themselves, the investors also. So there are several dimensions of CSR. If we really want to have a maximum social impact or environmental impact of the CSR activities, one should take CSR in a bigger perspective, in a comprehensive perspective. It should be understood. I'll explain as we move on. So this was regarding the awareness. That awareness, let us not be limited only to that, because if we limit our awareness only to Schedule 7, then perhaps the social impact will also be limited. Second was, I mentioned, mandatory spending. Yes, it is good. It's a very good development that companies are being now forced to spend 2% of their average net profits of the 3 previous financial years on CSR activities as listed out in Schedule 7 of the Act. The reason is that so far there were some companies which were not even lifting their little finger and showing concern for society and the environment. Nothing was being done by these companies. Of course, some companies were doing excellent work in CSR even without the guidelines and the rules. They were indulging in CSR initiatives. But there were many companies which were not having any concern for society or for the environment. It is good to the extent that these companies are now being forced to think in terms of doing something for society and something for the environment by making it mandatory for them to spend at least a small fraction of their profits on these issues. They have to now display concern and show empathy towards societal needs and environmental concerns. They have to do it, and they're forced to spend. This is actually trying to inculcate a habit of doing something for society, and so far this is a step towards inculcating this habit that you do something towards society and the environment. It is good. But again, I personally think that if you really want a full impact, social impact, in fact, not only social impact, environmental impact also through corporate efforts, you should think beyond 2% of these profits that you spend on societal needs or environmental concerns. Do you think 2% is good enough? Frankly speaking, I don't think so that 2% is good enough. And the reason is twofold. One is that 2% of the average net profits of the companies all taken together may run into thousands of crores. Back of the envelope calculation will tell you that it's probably thousands of crores. But still, it would be like a drop in the ocean as far as the requirements are concerned. Just before we entered this hall, when we were having breakfast outside, one gentleman expressed his happiness with this 2%. He says, wow, it's 2%, it's a huge involvement of CPSCs. I was surprised. 2% is nothing. People seem to think 2% is great. I think it's nothing. I am looking at 100%. I am more hungry. My hunger is not satiated with this 2%. I am looking at the 100% budgetary spend of the companies, not 2%. Where is that remaining 98 or so percent? Where is that? Can any of you tell me and raise your hands and tell me that yes, you think that the companies can afford to behave irresponsibly when spending that 98% of their profits? With irresponsible behavior towards society and the environment? Nobody can dare say that. They may do it, but nobody can say that and profess it in public. So therefore, what is this 2%? It is a minuscule thing. So, of course, it is a good beginning, no matter what I say. I do admit that it is a good beginning. When we were not, at a time when we were not spending anything, or maybe only a few companies were spending something on CSR, maybe this 2% is a welcome step. It definitely is a welcome step. And the Companies Act also, it doesn't limit it to 2%. It says at least 2%. But from my experience, from my observation of the companies from close quarters, having monitored their performance and evaluated their performance for more than 3.5 years, I have seen that very few would actually go beyond 2%. They would rather comply only with the 2% mandatory requirement and be done with it. And second is, as I was criticizing, not criticizing, but giving my viewpoints that this 2% is not enough. Second thing is, I would like to mention is that this 2% spending may reduce the perspective of CSR to a tokenism. A tokenism in the sense that companies would only think in terms of doing only 2% and not go beyond that. And if it is reduced to tokenism, that somehow they have to comply with the legal requirements of law, company law, and other legal requirements, statutory requirements, then the capability, the potential to impact society and environment is to that extent limited. It limits the impact. Their efforts are confined only to that. And the CSR efforts which are made towards spending 2% will not be sincere if it's only tokenism. If the attitude is that somehow spend 2% and be done with it, I can tell you the efforts will never be sincere. They will never be sincere. They will never be genuine concern for society. There will never be a genuine concern for the environment. It is a different thing. It is not mandatory spending. It has to be something more. I'll come to that later again, while I address you. But these are, I think, are severe limitations which need to be overcome, and one has to be cautious about these. Because when I talk about 100%, I mean that the entire activities, operations, processes of a company should be done in a way that there is minimal adverse impact on society or on the environment. And as far as possible, the company promotes social good and does something for ecological and environment protection. The entire mainstream activities, right now the law does not say that. It confines itself only to spending on 2%. But I personally would vouch and say that the entire activity should be such that the companies are concerned about society and environment, and they always, in their activities, normal activities, also try to strike a fine balance between these multiple and several interests which it handles at different levels. The interests of society, the interest of economy, the interest of environment, the interest of business, their own business also. There has to be a fine balance between these interests. And the company should strive for that. And that is why it is in this context that this creating shared value was promoted. It was promoted in this context, that even business is important for the companies. The financial sustainability of business is also important. So when they spend, 2% is sacrosanct. I'm not really touching the 2%. That is the law. 2% has to be spent on activities listed in Schedule 7 of the Act. But apart from this, the 98% or so of the budget of the company which is spent should be spent in such a manner that it does something good for society and does something good for the business also. It has financial gains. That is creating shared value. That is, you create value for society and you create value for business also. It should be mutually beneficial. And many companies have shown the way that they, yes, in mainstream activities also, they can undertake such initiatives. And they can reap rewards while doing something for the social good. So that is one thing I wanted to point it out. The third thing I mentioned was the involvement of the top management, the top leadership. That's a good development, I agree, in the CSR rules and the Companies Act that we have, because now it is virtually mandatory for all the public sector, all the top management of all companies to actually be aware of the CSR activities of the company. They have to be participants in the selection of the CSR activities. They have to periodically monitor and review the progress of CSR activities. They have to actually give a certificate. They have to certify that the 2% or so, whatever they have spent on CSR is as per the CSR rules and as per the Companies Act. They have to issue a certificate. And they also have to actually give an undertaking and explain the reasons as to why they were not able to spend that 2%. Not being able to spend 2% also has to be now explained by the management. So the management's involvement is there. But again, in my view, and I ask you before I give my view, is this sufficient? Is this good enough? Is this kind of involvement enough to ensure that the full impact of CSR activities and the activities undertaken by the company will have a beneficial effect on society and environment? I'm afraid not. It won't have. And the reason is, again, the focus and the attention of the management would be on spending. Somehow spending the 2%. But whether this money is well spent, whether it is spent on genuine causes, whether it actually creates a social impact, whether it creates an environmental impact, that may not be so. That may not be so. They just want to be sure that the money is spent. So the focus is on spending, but not on the impact assessment. Social impact assessment does not find mention, if you see, in the rules. But yes, we have mentioned in the guidelines that yes, they should be aware of the impact also. So impact is important. And only if the top management of the companies, they actually understand and realize the relevance and potential of CSR, the immense potential of CSR, to unlock business opportunities also. Once they realize that, and also realize that it is not simply a duty to be performed, that is the duty of spending 2% to be performed by them, will they really come up with innovative ideas? Will they come up with sustainability initiatives? They will come up with sustainability investments? Then it will make the difference, the real difference that we are seeking and looking at, then it will come. The mindset of the top management has to change. Not simply ensuring their involvement, you change the mindset. CSR and sustainability, these concepts have to be firmly ingrained in the DNA of the company, and the top management should actually facilitate this and help in this. Then it will make a difference. So whatever the developments have been so far are good, important, laudable, welcome, but something more needs to be done. I'm not criticizing what has been done. I'm only saying that our understanding of CSR and sustainability, which we have learned now through these rules guidelines, they need to be built upon now further for a larger structure and larger edifice of CSR and sustainability. So let us do that. They should be treated as building blocks. But if you want a full impact on society, on environment, and if you want to feel that full impact, then of course your awareness also has to be, as I said, widened, and the top management, this mindset has to be changed, and you have to look beyond this 2% spending. So you have to take a holistic view. And finally, I would say, we talk about social impact, and impact assessment, but I don't think we really have many refined tools at present which we can use for assessing the impact. There are not very many agencies, experts in the field, and I wish more experts were to come forward and we were to devise more tools, more devices, metrics for actually assessing the impact, because the proof of the pudding lies in eating. So whatever CSR efforts that we make, initiatives that we take, ultimately what matters is the impact. That is the most important thing, the impact on the beneficiaries of CSR. That would help us understand whether our efforts have borne fruit or not, whether they were useful or not, and how we can improvise upon them. So ladies and gentlemen, I think much needs to be done. Whatever has been done so far by the government is excellent, but we need to do much more and go beyond. It's a long road to be traveled, and I think over time we will definitely make progress. Thank you for your patient hearing. Thank you.
Good morning, all of you. Ashokji, thanks a lot for these exceptional remarks. In fact, some of the points that I actually could gather, about 5 or 6 things that come out fairly well out of this initial talk is, and which goes very well with the work that we are doing. One is about responsible business. That means that social objectives and economic objectives have to go in tandem. If we are actually going to delineate them, things are not really going to work in this country or across the world. The second thing is that we need to talk about ensuring financial stability. So when we are talking about that, what we are saying is that we need to have robust business models for businesses. This actually goes exceptionally well with the idea of 2% versus that 98%. So we need to build business models which can talk about that whole 100% of social enterprises, or how do we impact society. It is not going to be a very simple thing in terms of saying that we just invest 2%, because that is just about $3 billion. If we really want to solve the problems for this country, we need to build enterprises which are able to solve problems for the 100% of the population. And how do we do that? There are some exceptional examples that I've actually seen over the years. In fact, 4 of them actually come to my mind, and they're all from the healthcare sector. One is Operation Asha, which is very, very interesting. Vision Spring is an idea, Narayana Health has an idea, and Vatsalya has an idea. These guys have been able to do something exceptional in terms of going to the people, going to tier 2 cities, tier 3 cities, and actually having an impact on the people. The other thing that comes about is about shared value. How do we actually create value for society along with businesses? In fact, this is where we are actually doing something very interesting. We are launching the Shared Value Initiative on May 12th in New York. So this is our first public announcement. May 12th in New York, where Mike Porter and Mark Kramer are actually coming in and launching this initiative for us, and we have close to about 400 people in attendance. We have Ashokji, who's going with us at that event, and we are actually looking forward to that stunning experience. And then, of course, there was one more thing that comes out very strongly, and that is about measuring impact. How do we measure impact? We need to have indices which are able to do that. And how do I actually look at the beneficiary level? So this is where we are doing some work again on social progress, wherein we are trying to say that at various districts, what is actually happening. So there is an index that we have looked at wherein we are talking about human well-being, and we are saying as to how human well-being is actually getting affected across the board by efforts of the corporations. This is where we invite you again to really support our work. In fact, there are a lot of people here who would be willing to work with us. So welcome you to actually work with us, support the research, and do things with us at the Institute and the Council and the Shared Value Initiative. In fact, without further ado now, I would actually like to invite the next speaker, that is Nipun Vinayak. In fact, Nipun is one exceptional person who has done some amazing work in the area of sanitation in this country. In fact, he's been lauded for his efforts in the area of sanitation in 2 distinct locations in Maharashtra. One is Jalna, and the other one is in Nanded. In fact, I had a chance of visiting him when I was a young IAS officer, and I could see people loving him for the kind of efforts that he had actually done on sanitation. In fact, there were his photographs in temples, because people thought that he's one person who's actually made a difference to their lives, because he was one person who was able to show them the importance of sanitation, importance of cleanliness, importance of sustainability. In fact, and rightfully so, he today is part of the Swachh Bharat Abhiyan, one of the most important initiatives of the present government. So may I actually welcome Nipun Vinayak here to address the audience, please. Thank you.